Then pack your bags and leave this house, my father said, his voice clean and sharp like he'd rehearsed it in the mirror. My name is Elena Ward, I'm 32. When did love turn into something that could be signed away so easily? The room still smelled like roasted chicken and birthday candles burned down to black stubs. My grandfather sat at the head of the table, quiet, folding his napkin with slow care. The emerald green hotel keycard rested beside my plate, catching the light every time I breathed. It felt heavier than it should have, like it was listening. Dad had arrived late, of course. New wife on his arm. Her smile came first, before her words, before her eyes finished measuring the room. She touched the back of my chair like she already owned it. So, she said lightly, family should manage family assets together. I watched my father avoid my eyes. He stared at the keycard instead. Together, he repeated. That hotel is too big for one person. Grandpa didn't speak. He never rushed things. The silence stretched until it had weight. Somewhere in the kitchen, a chair creaked, like it was waiting for someone who wasn't coming back. I'm the only owner, I said, calm enough to surprise myself. Dad laughed once. Not kind. Not loud. Just enough to hurt. That's not how this family works. I realized then that the house I grew up in was already empty. Not of people, but of loyalty. And the keycard, that small green rectangle, felt less like a gift and more like a door quietly closing behind me. Grandpa's chuckle broke the tension, low and warm, the way a fireplace sounds before it catches. He reached for the emerald keycard and turned it between his fingers, studying it like a memory. Leonard, he said to my father without looking up, you've always been impatient. Dad stiffened. His wife's hand tightened around his arm. Her nails were pale pink, too neat for a moment like this. This isn't about patience, Dad snapped. It's about control. You're letting her divide the family. Grandpa finally looked up. His eyes were clear. The kind that had built an empire without ever raising his voice. No, he said. You divided it years ago. The room went very still. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator. My own breathing sounded too loud. The chair beside me, empty since my grandmother passed, seemed to lean closer as if it wanted to listen. Grandpa pushed his plate aside. Elena isn't just the owner, he said. She's the trustee. My father blinked. Of what? Grandpa smiled then. Not wide. Not kind. Knowing. The Emerald Hotel isn't a standalone asset. It's the keystone. My stepmother laughed softly, mocking. You're being dramatic. Grandpa reached into his jacket and placed a slim folder on the table. It landed between us with a sound like a final word. Inside, he said, are documents you signed and forgot you ever did. Dad's face drained of color. That's not possible. I felt something shift inside me, not joy, not fear, but clarity. Cold and steady. The keycard pulsed green under the light, like a heartbeat that wasn't mine anymore. Grandpa leaned back. Read it, Leonard. Then decide who should be packing their bags. My father's hand hovered over the folder, trembling. My father opened the folder with hands that suddenly looked older than I remembered. Paper whispered against paper. His eyes moved fast at first, then slower, then not at all. My stepmother leaned in, her perfume sharp, impatient. What is it? She asked. He didn't answer. Grandpa sipped his water. The glass clinked softly, an ordinary sound that felt too loud. I watched the emerald keycard near my plate. The light hit it, and for a moment I saw my own reflection warped across the plastic, like a version of me that had already survived this. You signed power of attorney, Grandpa said calmly. 10 years ago. Right after you lost the shipping contracts. You didn't want creditors knocking on your door. That was temporary, Dad muttered. It became permanent, Grandpa replied. When you stopped asking questions. My father's jaw tightened. This gives her. He jabbed a finger toward me without looking. Control over. Every property tied to the emerald, Grandpa finished. Including the house you're standing in. Silence fell hard. My stepmother straightened, eyes flashing. That's absurd, she said. Leonard, tell him that's absurd. Dad swallowed. I heard it. A small human sound. Elena, he said finally, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. We can fix this. We're family. Family. The word landed wrong. Like a coat that never fit but everyone insisted you wear. I stood up slowly. The chair scraped the floor, reluctant as if it wanted me to stay seated. I picked up the keycard. It was warm now. I already fixed it, I said. Grandpa nodded once. My father looked between us, understanding dawning too late. Outside, a car door slammed. Somewhere, a phone began to ring and didn't stop. The phone kept ringing. No one answered it. My father stared at the table like it might explain itself if he waited long enough. I need air, my stepmother said, already backing toward the hallway. Her heels clicked too fast. Fear always changed her rhythm. Grandpa folded his hands. Sit, he told my father. Not loud. Not angry. Just final. Dad didn't. He stood instead, smoothing his tie like this was a meeting he could still win. You planned this, he said to me. Accusation disguised as disbelief. I met his eyes. For the first time in years he didn't look past me. I prepared, I said. There's a difference. The emerald keycard pressed into my palm. I remembered holding it earlier, smiling for photos, pretending this was just a birthday gift. A joke of excess. The chair beside me, still empty, felt closer now, like it approved. You can't just erase me, he said. His voice cracked on the last word. I didn't erase you, I replied. You signed yourself out. Grandpa stood. The room seemed to straighten with him. Elena has already met with the board, he said. Quietly. Respectfully. They like her. Dad laughed, sharp and hollow. Behind my back? No, Grandpa corrected. In front of your absence. I watched my father's face change as pieces connected. Missed calls. Delayed emails. Doors that suddenly closed politely instead of slamming. The house felt different now. Less like a cage, more like a witness. I'll fight this, he said weakly. Grandpa smiled. You can try. And for the first time I felt it, not triumph, not anger, but a calm that settled deep in my chest, steady as stone. My father sank back into his chair like the strength had leaked out of him. The house creaked softly, the way old buildings do when they adjust to a new truth. Somewhere upstairs a door closed. My stepmother had locked herself into a room that was no longer hers. I built this family, Dad said quietly, staring at the grain of the table. I deserve a say. Grandpa didn't argue. He never wasted words on things that had already ended. You built leverage, he said. Not loyalty. I slipped the emerald keycard into my pocket. The plastic brushed my fingers, grounding me. I thought of the hotel lobby, marble floors, quiet confidence, staff who looked people in the eye. A place where order mattered. My phone vibrated. One message. Then another. Board members. Legal counsel. Short, respectful lines. We'll follow your lead. I didn't reply yet. Dad looked up, suddenly alert. Who's that? Work, I said. He flinched. Just a flicker. Enough. Grandpa reached for his cane. Leonard, he said, softer now. You can stay for cake if you want. The absurdity almost made me laugh. Almost. I'm not done, my father snapped, standing again. You think papers make you powerful? I stepped closer, lowering my voice. No. Consistency does. His eyes searched my face for the daughter who used to wait by the window for him. She wasn't there anymore. The chair beside the table seemed to relax, like it had finally been proven right. Outside, sirens passed in the distance. Someone else's emergency, someone else's mess. My phone vibrated again. This time it was the city registry. And I knew the next move had already begun. The message from the city registry sat on my screen like a held breath. I read it once. Then again. My father watched my face the way gamblers watch dice, waiting for a tell. Grandpa cut a small piece of cake and placed it on my plate. Eat, he said. You'll need the energy. I did. The frosting was too sweet. Childhood sweet. It reminded me of birthdays when Dad used to lift me onto his shoulders, when promises were loud and consequences were quiet. What is it? Dad asked. I locked my phone and slipped it face down on the table. Routine confirmation, I said. True enough. He exhaled, relieved too quickly. Good. Because this doesn't have to get ugly. That word again. Ugly. As if truth was the problem. From the hallway came the sound of a drawer opening, then closing. My stepmother was packing. Not dramatically. Carefully. The way people do when they think they might still talk their way back in. Grandpa dabbed his mouth with a napkin. Leonard, he said, The hotel sits on land rezoned last year. Mixed use. Commercial and residential. Dad frowned. So, Grandpa continued, the permits were fast-tracked this morning. Elena signed. My father turned to me slowly. Signed what? I met his eyes. The employee housing expansion. And the community lease. His mouth opened then closed. He understood now. Not control, context. Reputation. Neighbors. Voters. The kind of power that doesn't shout. You used my name, he said. No, I replied. I used mine. The emerald keycard pressed against my leg, steady as a pulse. I felt no rush. Just alignment. Like something that had been crooked for years finally straightened itself. My father sat back down without realizing he'd done it. The fight drained out of him in stages, shoulders first, then voice, then eyes. The house seemed to notice. The lights hummed lower. Even the clock slowed its ticking like it was listening. You planned this with him, Dad said, nodding at Grandpa. Grandpa shook his head. I advised. She decided. That landed harder than any accusation. Dad looked at me, really looked, as if measuring how long I'd been standing on my own without him noticing. From the hallway, my stepmother appeared with a small suitcase. She didn't look at anyone. She paused by the mirror, adjusted her hair, practiced a smile that didn't hold. I'll call you, she said to my father. He didn't. The front door closed gently. No slam. No drama. The quiet after felt deliberate. My phone vibrated again. This time it was a voicemail. I stepped away from the table and listened with one ear, the emerald keycard cool against my thigh. Elena, the voice said, our family attorney, careful and calm, the injunction is ready. If he contests, it becomes public record by morning. Public. The word settled like dust in sunlight. I returned to the table. Dad searched my face. What happens now? He asked. I thought of the hotel staff. The community leases. The neighbors who'd already heard my name attached to something generous instead of greedy. Now, I said, things are seen. Grandpa pushed the mirror centerpiece toward my father. He caught his reflection by accident and looked away. The house felt complete for the first time in years. And tomorrow it would all be official. Morning arrived without ceremony. Pale light slid through the windows and rested on the dining table like it had always belonged there. My father sat alone, jacket folded beside him, staring at the mirror Grandpa had left behind. He looked smaller in daylight. Less certain. Truth does that. The injunction became public before breakfast. Not as scandal. As structure. Clean filings. Clear ownership. A quiet note about employee housing and community access. People didn't whisper. They nodded. Dad didn't fight it. Not because he couldn't, but because the fight would have shown too much. The debts. The signatures. The years he'd spent borrowing against trust he thought would never run out. Legal revenge is rarely loud. It just closes doors softly and locks them properly. He packed by noon. No shouting. No speeches. When he passed me in the hall, he hesitated. You didn't have to do it this way, he said. I looked at the emerald keycard in my hand. The symbol that had changed everything without raising its voice. Yes, I replied. I did. Grandpa watched from his chair, eyes warm, proud but restrained. He never liked victory laps. Later I stood in the lobby of the Emerald Hotel. Staff moved with purpose. Guests smiled without knowing why they felt safe there. I slipped the keycard into my pocket and felt nothing heavy about it anymore. That night, back in the house, I placed the mirror upright in the hallway. Not to admire myself, but to remember who I am when reflected honestly. I didn't take his place. I took my own.